I think we as human beings find beauty in things that we can understand. It's a different kind of beauty than when we see something that's too complex, that's like just above us, kind of like an amazing painting. When we learn about biology and we understand like how a tree makes leaves or something like that, then you can look at a tree and really find beauty in the model that created this object, and you can kind of understand all the parts to that. And I think that there's something similar in minimalist art especially, where you can look at something very, very simple and understand the processes that went into that and find beauty in the kind of like, just sort of like profound level of it, of being able to comprehend an entire system. I'm Tristan Perich, and I'm a visual artist and composer. I live here in New York, and I'm generally interested in this question of where the physical world around us meets the abstract world of computation and electronics. And that's a question, I guess, that has driven a lot of my work, both in music and in visual art, and kind of the spaces between. When people see, for instance, the drawings, like the installation that's up at Georgia Museum of Art, I'd hope that my work is able to sort of draw people into thinking about some of the processes that are not only present in the work, but that are actually all around us. Like how the drawings are made by machine, they're made by code, but it's code, it's software in dialogue with the physical world around us. The drawing machine couldn't exist without gravity, and if I were to, for instance, simulate the drawing machine on a computer, I would only get half the picture. I'd get what the code is telling the pen to do, not what actually happens between the code and the pen. So when those motors turn slightly, they send ripples down the thread that's connected to the pen. The pen has mass and will kind of jump, and it has a momentum. And it won't make perfect contact with the paper, and there will be a little texture on the paper, and that will prevent it from drawing a black line the same way as it might on a computer simulation, for instance. And all of those secondary effects that come after the output of the code are parts of the world around us, and they're consequences of gravity and texture. And I'm inspired by these things. Thinking about these things is what makes me create these works. So I'm hoping that when someone sees the drawing machine, it maybe opens up another aspect of the world around them, whether it's the laws of physics or thinking a little bit more about computation. So I'm probably going to crash this stuff.
That's what we've got set up.
For me as a composer, the experience of seeing a piece performed is like the best experience in the world. It's like, it's the realization of an idea that I put to paper and that then gets performed. And I think that's the role of the composer in my mind. I'm very kind of traditional in these sort of like roles of artists in different media and stuff. So like the role of the composer is to create a score that then gets realized by musicians. So the experience of my work can't happen until after it's left my hands, usually. So we're here in South Salem, New York, in my temporary studio. My wife and I have been spending a few months up here, and since our daughter has been born. She turned 2 months old yesterday, and getting some time outside of the city in the countryside has been a beautiful place to raise a newborn. And so we've been lucky to stay here at my grandmother's place. And I've sort of set up a really messy but effective temporary studio with most of what I'm working on right now. So this is a test panel for a new iteration of my wall audio speaker arrays. It's based on the same kind of layout as the first piece, microtonal wall, which is 1,500 speakers that are all emitting these microtonal frequencies in a kind of continuous range of pitch. That essentially becomes one in a series of pieces that I'm working on that explores pitch, it explores sound and frequency. Typically, my studio is overflowing with these plastic bins. It's the only way I've been able to stay organized because I work so much with electronics and small components. I end up with lots of different audio jacks, lots of different battery holders and other kinds of microchips and old circuit boards that I've been working on, or parts for projects and motors and all this stuff. But the organization breaks down when you end up with 30 or so bins that just say unsorted parts. Kind of like the staging ground of like throwing stuff in that and dealing with it one day. But often that one day doesn't really come very often. I don't know, looking through these bins, we've got a few with parts for the drawing machine. This one is full of pens that I use, different kinds of Micron and other pens, which allows me to play with line width, with ink flow. I often save pens that are partially used so that I can start with a pen that's almost dry and end up with a drawing that's very, very light and feathery and just kind of dissolves very quickly, as opposed to a very strong dark line at the beginning. This is a bin called Drawing Machine, and it's basically got all the parts, because I mean the drawing machine is a very simple machine. It's basically just two motors that connect down to a pen, and they connect with fishing line, which is, you know, just a very thin thread. And so I have lots and lots of different kinds of fishing line, I think in a different bin, but I have like maybe 12 of these. A bunch of different backup clips, and these are prototypes for a new version of the motors. The drawing machines, I guess it highlights my design process in general pretty well, because I've now been working with it for pretty much exactly like 9-10 years, and the mechanism, the design has stayed almost identical. It's just two motors connected to a circuit board which can control the motion of a pen in a very, very basic way. This is an album I put out first in 2009, and it's the second album, basically, a follow-up to one I put out a few years before that in 2005, One Bit Music. And basically it's a CD case with an electronic circuit inside and a headphone jack on the side. So when you plug into this CD case and you turn on the circuit, it plays back this album of electronic music that I've written for it. This very lo-fi, one-bit sound composed essentially for headphones. Once I was working with these microchips in my music, I realized that I was thinking more and more about process in general, musical process and process in code. And I'd grown up surrounded by minimalist art. I saw a lot of minimalist art and loved the process, the very, very bare bones process behind a lot of it. And my father is a visual artist who built a painting machine that makes these really, really beautiful paintings out of horizontal lines, these large canvases, very kind of vibrant, emotional, intense pieces that are made by machine. Growing up with the idea that machine-made art is just as valid and legit as any other kind of art made by hand. And I think that that resonated with what I was realizing in my own work, which was that I was really interested in the process, and the process itself actually has nothing to do necessarily with music. Maybe it's more about computation. And so I ultimately kind of extracted those processes and started working in other media, like making drawings by machines or sound installations and video work with like 1-bit video signals, where they're all connected conceptually and in terms of the processes behind them, but clearly they deal with very different media. I grew up playing piano. My parents had me taking piano lessons from when I was a young kid, and I pretty much always hated reading music, playing sheet music, playing other people's music, and I would much rather improvise and write my own music. And I think this is kind of the story for a lot of composers, but that basically grew into just composing music for piano and then other instruments, and kind of growing the ensemble that I would compose for. And through that whole period, I was actually really anti using electronics in my work. I was drawn to sort of the traditional acoustic sound of instruments. I think a lot of that maybe came from playing the piano growing up, which is such a beautiful and very physical instrument, and I had a really bright piano that you could pound really hard on, and it would just bloom. The sound was so wonderful and so strong that using electronics in my composed work kind of didn't really mean anything to me at the time. And a lot of that changed when I started working with microchips, these microprocessors that are now at the heart of almost all of my work. These very, very simple computers that I can download software that I've programmed onto them, and they execute the software when you power them. But the difference between these very, very bare bones microchips and regular computers is that you can't take anything for granted using these chips. You can't just connect a display to them, or your headphones, or a mouse or a keyboard or something like that. You have to explicitly, they're totally clean slates. They don't have any built-in functionality. They're essentially just processing information and outputting ones and zeros, this binary digital information. That led to me working with electronics, with classical instrumentation, thinking about electronic sound as something more physical than I had before, kind of complementing the way traditional instruments make sound through vibration of material, this very kind of tangible connection to sound, basically, between material and sound. As my work goes on, it gets farther and farther in the future. It's really like the building of the mountain or something. This idea that the work really can't be experienced and appreciated until it's done, and gets the bigger the piece, the farther away that moment is. And so I think it's the idea that that I'm working towards these projects that I feel very, very strongly about, and I really want to exist in the world. Needing to make them exist, basically, is like a kind of, I don't want to call it a calling, but it feels sometimes a little bit like that, like a kind of being a slave to my own work or something. Like I don't know, it sounds kind of weird to say it right now, but in a way, the pieces are bigger than the work that goes, than my day-to-day life.